Unpredictable consequences if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. Is the world facing an economic crisis? Tensions in the Middle East continue to rise. And with Iran's threats to block the Strait of Hormuz, the world faces the risk of an energy crisis and a standstill in global trade. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital artery for around 20% of the world's crude oil and 25% of liquefied natural gas. If this route is blocked, oil prices could skyrocket. Not only would Gulf oil exporting countries be affected, but major economic powers like the US, EU, China, and Japan would also face severe impacts. Can the world withstand such a shock? Or would it plunge into a full-blown crisis? Welcome back to Military Hotspot. Before we begin today's video, take a moment to like and subscribe to stay updated on our latest insights. To transport goods from one continent to another, they must cross vast oceans that cover 70% of the Earth's surface. In the 21st century, several methods make this possible, with air travel being the quickest, taking just hours. However, air freight is costly, especially for heavy cargo. For this reason, 80% of global trade in the 21st century still relies on ships, as it has for thousands of years. Today, more than 50,000 merchant ships sail the oceans, transporting over 6 million containers daily between continents. These routes act as lifelines for the global economy. However, crossing the oceans isn't simple. The geography of continents, islands, and water currents creates numerous natural choke points that concentrate commercial routes through specific areas. When these choke points are blocked, even briefly, they can significantly disrupt the global economy. This is exactly what happened in March 2023, when Evergreen's Ever Given ship ran aground and blocked the Suez Canal for 6 days, severely disrupting global trade. This incident resulted in nearly $10 billion in lost trade value and caused widespread delays in shipping and logistics from North America to Australia. In addition to the Suez Canal, there are numerous strategic maritime choke points worldwide that control the flow of global trade. For example, the Panama Canal serves as an essential gateway between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, allowing ships to pass through the Americas without traveling around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. The Cape of Good Hope itself is another choke point, controlling trade flow around the African continent. Similarly, the Strait of Gibraltar is the only passage between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, essential for vessels traveling from Europe to the Americas. The Danish Straits control the flow between the Baltic and North Seas, playing a crucial role in European trade. The Turkish Straits connect the Mediterranean to the Black Sea, serving as a strategic location for both commerce and geopolitics. The Strait of Malacca between the Pacific and Indian Oceans is one of the world's busiest maritime routes, moving a substantial amount of goods between Southeast Asia and China. These choke points act as commercial gateways but also become vulnerable points, easily disrupted by accidents, conflicts, or natural disasters, causing severe delays and disruptions to global trade flows. Recently, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Suez Canal, which together handle around 15% of global maritime trade, have experienced significant disruptions due to rebel attacks targeting vessels in the region. According to IMF data, the number of vessels passing through the Red Sea dropped by 2/3 year-on-year, as many shippers avoided the area for security reasons. Across the globe, the Panama Canal faced severe drought in 2023, reducing the number of transiting ships significantly. While there are many strategic maritime choke points worldwide, none hold the same level of importance and risk as the Strait of Hormuz. Tensions in the Middle East are rising, and strategic waters from the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden are becoming increasingly dangerous. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical choke points for global oil transport, may soon become the focal point in this tension chain. The Strait of Hormuz is not only the sole route connecting the Persian Gulf to the outside world but also the only gateway for vessels moving between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman to access international oceans. The Strait of Hormuz controls the flow of vast quantities of oil and natural gas, the lifeblood of the modern global economy. The Persian Gulf is particularly crucial because 8 countries have coastlines there: Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Oman. For 4 of these nations, the only exit to the open sea is through the Gulf of Oman, which means that the 30-mile-wide Strait of Hormuz is their sole path to access the ocean. If you know anything about the Middle East and the Gulf nations, you know that nearly all of them are immensely rich in oil, an energy source crucial to the global economy. About 1/3 of global energy comes from oil. And every day, humanity consumes over 9 million barrels. Oil remains the most widely used energy source for human civilization in the 21st century. Being a non-renewable resource, oil can only be extracted from where it naturally exists. Remarkably, oil isn't naturally abundant in too many places worldwide. Around the Persian Gulf basin lies half of the world's oil reserves, including the largest oil field in the world, Ghawar, in Saudi Arabia, which accounts for nearly 6% of global oil supply. This region hosts dozens of wealthy oil fields spanning the 8 countries along the Persian Gulf. But oil isn't the only valuable resource here. 40% of the world's natural gas reserves are also found here. Natural gas is the 3rd most widely used energy source globally, after oil and coal. And over 1/5 of global energy is produced from it. Qatar is the world's largest producer of liquefied natural gas. And according to British Petroleum, Iran holds the world's largest natural gas reserves. The Persian Gulf and its neighboring lands contain more oil and gas than any other area on Earth. Currently, about 1/3 of the world's oil production comes from the Persian Gulf. And oil supplies 1/3 of global energy, with an additional 1/5 of natural gas production also originating from this region. This means around 15% of the planet's energy supply depends on the Persian Gulf, primarily through the Strait of Hormuz. Any disruption at the Strait of Hormuz could paralyze energy supply chains in many countries, severely impacting the global economy. No other choke point in the world compares in significance to the Strait of Hormuz within the 21st century transportation network. The nations exporting oil and natural gas from this region have few, if any, alternatives outside of relying on this strait. Navigating the Strait of Hormuz is no simple task. Due to its complex geography, there are 8 large islands that ships must avoid, 7 of which are currently controlled by Iran. Some parts of the strait are too shallow for oil tankers to pass, while others have visibility issues due to surrounding islands and land masses. Fog and dust frequently appear, particularly in the summer, making navigation in this area even more dangerous and complicated. The United Nations has established a special traffic separation system in the Strait of Hormuz to ensure the safety of oil tankers and commercial ships. This system includes 2 2-mile-wide lanes, one for inbound ships and one for outbound, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone to minimize collision risks. This vital route passes through the territorial waters of 3 countries: Iran, the UAE, and Oman. In adverse weather conditions such as sandstorms and fog, navigation through the strait becomes extremely challenging. Risks increase due to the presence of islands and shallow waters, requiring ships to follow very narrow routes with little room to avoid obstacles. With high traffic density and some of the world's largest oil tankers passing through, any incident at the strait could have grave consequences for the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is not only crucial for the Persian Gulf nations but also for major Asian economies. China, the world's 2nd largest economy, is highly dependent on oil flow from the Strait of Hormuz, with about 45% of its oil supply imported from the 8 countries around the Persian Gulf. Japan, the world's 3rd largest economy, is even more dependent on this energy source. Known for its scarcity of natural resources essential for industry, Japan imports nearly all of its energy needs. Oil and liquefied natural gas make up more than 60% of Japan's energy demand, and nearly 80% of that is transported from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz. This means nearly half of the energy essential to the world's 3rd largest economy must pass through a narrow 30-mile waterway. South Korea imports nearly 70% of its oil from Gulf nations, with oil providing more than 40% of the country's energy needs. Thus, 1/3 of South Korea's energy supply depends directly on the flow through the Strait of Hormuz, with no feasible alternative. The Strait of Hormuz holds an irreplaceable strategic role in the global economy. If the Strait of Hormuz were blocked or ceased operations for an extended period, the world's leading economies would face an immediate standstill. Meanwhile, the primary revenue source for the 8 nations around the Persian Gulf would dry up, triggering a chain reaction that could very likely lead to the collapse of the global economy. Saudi Arabia has a system of pipelines for transporting crude oil and liquefied natural gas from oil fields around the Persian Gulf to its port on the Red Sea. However, this pipeline network is insufficient to meet the entire demand and currently faces numerous operational challenges. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, also has a similar pipeline to transport oil through the Gulf of Oman and out of the Strait of Hormuz. However, both systems can only transfer a small portion of the oil needed. Countries like Qatar, Bahrain, and Iraq lack similar alternative pipeline systems entirely. This means that expanding or building additional pipelines would only be a short-term solution, but a costly one. All these factors make the Strait of Hormuz a critical strategic hotspot. The United States cannot stand by in the face of global tensions and has long maintained a presence in the region. The US has built deep partnerships with Gulf nations like Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Iraq. Through these alliances, the US ensures a stable oil flow and protects international economic interests in the area. US presence here goes beyond military support, extending to economic development, security cooperation, and foreign policy. This helps reinforce America's role in maintaining smooth international trade through the Strait of Hormuz while mitigating the effects of regional instability. The tense relationship between the US and Iran has lasted over 40 years, beginning when the two nations formally cut diplomatic ties in 1980. The US has imposed economic sanctions on Iran for decades to pressure the Tehran government and curb both its nuclear programs and its influence in the Middle East. The sanctions started in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution overthrew the monarchy and established the Islamic Republic. These sanctions included freezing Iranian assets, banning oil imports, and blocking international banks from trading with Iran. A major development in these sanctions occurred in 2018 when the US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, JCPOA, under President Donald Trump and reinstated harsher sanctions. These measures have significantly impacted Iran's economy, particularly in the oil export sector, the nation's main revenue source. These sanctions not only restrict Iran's access to global oil markets but also make it challenging for the country to access the international financial system and import crucial equipment. US sanctions have isolated Iran economically, increasing pressure on its government. However, they have also continuously fueled tension in the Persian Gulf. Iran has responded by boosting its military influence in the Strait of Hormuz and threatening to close the route, further escalating tensions. This threat to close the Strait of Hormuz is a strategic card Iran has played multiple times to pressure Western powers, as its success would severely disrupt global oil trade. However, closing the Strait of Hormuz is not a simple task. Iran understands that such an action could prompt a strong response from many countries, particularly the US and Saudi Arabia, with close partnerships in the region. The US is always ready to protect its own interests and those of its allies. Fortunately, the tension between Iran and the US has never escalated into full-scale military conflict over the years. Both sides have continued to increase pressure through political and economic measures, making the situation at the Strait of Hormuz increasingly complex and sensitive. This makes the area one of the world's most critical strategic hotspots, where any move can have far-reaching effects on the global economy. Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with interesting and valuable information from our channel. See you next time.